Hello everyone, welcome to another episode from Ampro Engineering. This is going to be another installment of the buyer's guide featuring the first car to ever use the Tamiya ORV or off-road vehicle chassis. This is the 58038 Subaru Brat. This vehicle has been re-released. The standard 58384 with a white body and your white wheels with a gray chassis has been out for quite some time, but recently Tamiya did come out with the 47413, which is a special variant that has a blue body, a black chassis, or perhaps a charcoal chassis with charcoal wheels. And perhaps the most sought after 84237, which is the entirely chrome one. So we'll talk about some of the differences, but let's focus on what we have right here first. The Brat was originally released on July 30th, 1983, and was two versions ahead of the Tamiya Frog, which was preceded also by the Lancia Rally. The most interesting thing about the Brat, of course, is going to be the body. The Brat is based on the Subaru Brat, obviously it's a Subaru Brat, which was also a four-wheel drive vehicle. Of course, the proportions have been heavily exaggerated on the Tamiya model to give it a more playful look. The body is ABS plastic. The original is molded in white, and it has the main body shell that you see here. It has the rear fascia panel, which includes the taillights, and the front fascia panel, which includes headlights, side markers. These are not separate headlights, so they can't be illuminated easily. It also has this factory-looking front bull bar, which is on the bumper attached to the body, so it's something that's there for cosmetics and not actually to use, because hitting this would definitely not be good for the body. This is an original example, and one of the ways that you can tell the original is that it will have a clear windshield with clear T-tops on the roof, as well as a clear rear window. This car also should have a gray chassis. When I originally got this car, the chassis was broken and all that was available was that from the Super Blackfoot, and hence the Super Blackfoot chassis installed. The front offset is slightly wider than the rear, and although it's going to be hard for me to explain, well, I guess you can see it. I guess you can kind of see it from here. Although that might not appear cosmetically appealing, it does in fact improve its off-road capabilities. Granted, this thing is still pretty limited given its clearance and suspension, which we'll cover in a moment, but I did want to point that out. This version has been highly modified, so I do have a slightly more stock chassis that I can refer to. This is that gray that I was talking about a moment ago. This one here has yellowed over the years, but this should normally be a little bit brighter of a gray. The chassis is identical to that, of course, on the King Blackfoot that we see here, as well as the Monster Beetle. The details on this body were really what Tamiya has always been known for. The little louvers behind the front window, the nicely detailed moldings around the windows again, the turn signal, driving light, and headlight, the grille. I mean, even look at the little details on the actual Subaru emblem. They are all present. The Brat also had the availability to have these neat T-tops. Now, unlike a lot of T-tops, these didn't simply pop out. These were hinged at the center and popped upward on the real car. Tamiya even has a reference to this in the first page of the original Brat manual, and you can see that the tops have been popped upwards. The rims, in fact, pay homage to the actual Brat's wagon wheel style. Of course, the arches are significantly exaggerated to allow them to fully clear the wheel. It does have this nice roll bar. This one has been modified with some old King Blackfoot spotlights. The standard one would have not had these spotlights. And you do have the Brat driver, which is unique to the Brat. Although the driver and the arms do look exactly the same as the F-150, this would have come on a different sprue because it bolts to this back panel of the rear window. This red is the same plastic as the back window. Let's remove the body and take a look at this thing underneath. This antenna is not the correct one that would have come on this Brat. It would have had this metal antenna, which you would have wrapped the radio's antenna completely around, and that would have hooked in right into this little hole here and been secured with a screw and washer right there. This is simply an Ampro antenna adapter. Something quite iconic on the ORV chassis, on the Brat, the Lancia, and the Frog, is this front suspension. On the original car, it is, if you can look through that little hole right there, there's a little white plunger that you can see, and that plunger is being pressed on by a little arm on this lower control arm, and cantilevers in and gives you the front suspension. Now, these are not dampened, and there were aftermarket kits to help you simply apply a dampener to this, which I would imagine worked with mixed results. But what this gave you was a very neat, tidy front suspension, and on the Frog in particular, because it was all exposed, gave it a very unique look. Something also to note, on the original Brat, and this does not apply to either 3 of the re-releases, the original has a rear spool. So there is no differential on the original Brat and on the original Lancia Rally. This is very likely the reason why the subsequent ORV cars had such a problem with their differential, because they were not originally intended to have one. They also have this really neat little on-off switch plate cover, which normally sandwiches a rubber gasket between this bracket and this. So you get this whole look, and the rubber gasket is basically there to keep grime out of the switch. The Tamiya manual does show the switch reversed, which is interesting because now the larger switch is kind of low to the ground, so I would use some caution in going with that setup. On early versions of this, you'll find that these 2 holes are occupied by the mechanical speed control, which is what this secondary location for a servo is. This servo will function using this bell crank to steer the car left and right, and you will find a good amount of slop. I mean, it is a Tamiya, that's just what you're going to find. On this car here, I have installed the speed control at the rear. However, oftentimes you'll see the receiver installed there. I have always found that the receiver seems to be nicely placed just underneath the battery right in here. This area is usually not used, so I always take advantage of that and place the receiver in there just to get some clutter out of the way. This particular version of the car is slightly upgraded. It does have the CRP front suspension kit here. At the rear, we do have these braces. These are stainless steel 3D printed braces that help to prevent this arm from splitting. Both of these arms on this car were broken, and this will prevent them from getting any worse. A differential has also been installed in this particular car, and as I mentioned before, only the vintage car will have the spool. This truck usually would have come with the 380 stock motor. It has been replaced on this little guy here with the setup from the Blackfoot. So all of the gearing in this is from the Blackfoot, but it's important to note that the gears inside here and the gears in the Blackfoot or Monster Beetle or Mud Blaster are not the same. All of the gears are slightly different in quantity of teeth. So even if you want to install the MIP ball differential on your Brat, you will have to buy the Blackfoot counter gear set as well as the new Tamiya constant velocity drive axle set. This original does have the hex drive axles. The 58384 version of this here came with dog bones, so you'll have an outdrive cup here as well as a cup here for a dog bone. I'm uncertain what the current 47413 version, the blue version, has, whether it's using the dog bones or the constant velocity drive axles from the Blackfoot. This car here does have these oil-filled shocks equipped from the Frog, but out of the box, these would have been a friction lay-down shock here at the rear. This brace under the car is from the Frog and not from the Brat. The downside of not having this is that the bottom of your servo, especially a full height servo, tends to be kind of low to the ground, and any kind of jumping, if you've got any uneven surface, it's possible that something on the ground will come up and damage the servo. So this is a nice little upgrade. And again, this is from the Frog. I also wanted to mention that if you are running a Tamiya hump pack, which is fairly unlikely, but that will require additional space underneath this battery area, where I had previously mentioned I placed my receiver. So this hump would tuck itself nicely in the void under this speed control here. Tires are the Sandmaster 915s. They are the same front and rear. However, the rims are, of course, very different. Fronts have bushings, or in this case, bearings, and the rear have your standard Tamiya 5-lug mounting system. Before I put the body back on the car, I did want to mention one thing. This cutout is designed for you to chop out in the event you wanted to install this body on the SRB, or the Special Racing Buggy chassis. The body mounts are very peculiar. They're not round. They're these little triangular little posts, and they sit way down in here. You can see that on this side, it's just got this little, maybe 1.5 millimeter lip of plastic. On this side, it's missing. It's actually broken through. These bodies are notoriously weak, and I hesitate to blame Tamiya for this, because you have to remember that this car came out in 1983. So they were just getting their stride as well. And it wasn't until later cars that actually had a little bit better mounting scheme, where the bodies would be a little bit better off in the event of an accident. I think it's time to take this for a drive. The Tamiya Brat is quite possibly one of the most iconic Tamiya cars. For me, it's also one of my most favorite. I do happen to really like the look of the vehicle, although my tastes have slowly changed into the more scale appearance. This still does have this odd mix of scale and fun about it that it's simply missing from almost all other RCs ever made. This car is also made a bit famous in the movie The Manhattan Project, where it played a central role in smuggling some plutonium out of a plutonium refining facility. It's actually a surprisingly good movie, and yes, this car genuinely plays a very, very important role in the movie. The question is, do you want one? If you are a collector, you probably already have one. If you're into Tamiyas, you probably already have one. And with that said, yeah, you probably want to get one. If you're not into the specifically more original vehicles, like the 58038, or as the manual actually shows, the 5838, this is not a typo. This was set up prior to Tamiya actually needing more space in the car's model number. Overall, you're probably better off getting yourself a brand new one as opposed to a used one. The main issues that you're going to find with this car have to do with the body. Even though the ORV cars like the Monster Beetle and the Blackfoot do suffer from really, really bad differentials, even the re-release cars with the differentials aren't going to be nearly as bad if you are running the stock motor, because with the reduced rotating mass, there's going to be less stress on the gearbox. This car does look magnificent on the shelf for a collector. The box art is beautiful. In fact, the box art on this car technically is just the stock look of the Brat. There are a couple variations to the decals. I think both look very, very nice. But if you're out there wanting to run this car, is this a good car to buy? For this car, it's not so cut and dry. How I operate this car, yes, absolutely. I don't really jump it. I don't beat on it. The car's got a upgraded yet still very slow stock motor. And for the decades that I've owned this body, I mean, it's never been crashed, it's never been rolled, but I'm very, very particular with this car. The reason why I hesitate, and why, I'll explain in a moment, but why Tamiya agrees, is that this body is notoriously fragile. One hit in the front of this car and it's trashed. This is why the re-release cars came with two bodies. You've got your beautiful injection molded plastic body, and they also came with a very durable Lexan body. So for the collector, get yourself an original car. The patina and the look of these chassis as they age, the yellowing, I think it looks fantastic. I think they look really, really good on your shelf, having that slight yellow to the chassis, the slight yellow to the wheels. Personally, I think it makes the car more attractive because it gives it some history. The newer cars, if you're going to drive them, don't waste your money with the old car. Get yourself a brand new one. The plastics will be less brittle. You are going to have a differential. And I do believe that the modern ones also come with a speed control, so that's also another benefit to the car. It's not very good off-road, it's not really good for jumping, but overall the car definitely has that nostalgic value. To me, it doesn't quite have that crappiness factor like the Hornet and the Midnight Pumpkin do, where they're so bad they're great. This is actually not that bad. Again, the rear suspension it's better than the Hornet is. The front suspension is better than the Hornet is. It's certainly not a modern buggy, but it's certainly not a terrible one. If you like scale, you like old, you'll like this. Thank you all so much for watching, and for the next version of the Buyer's Guide series, we'll cover the next ORV car produced. We'll see you next time.